Commander SCI-FI floated in the dark silence of space, trapped inside a metal coffin that was slowly killing him. The escape pod's walls pressed close around his scaled body, and every breath came harder than the last. Red warning lights blinked at him from the control panel, telling him what he already knew. He was going to die out here. 3 days ago, he had been standing on the bridge of the Stellar Dawn, watching his crew prepare for battle. The Korth Empire ships had appeared without warning, their black hulls cutting through space like predators, hunting prey. The battle had been fierce but short. The Korth had better weapons, better shields, and no mercy. One by one, the Confederation ships had exploded into clouds of metal and fire. SCI-FI remembered the moment when his own ship's hull cracked open like an egg. The emergency alarm screamed as atmosphere rushed out into the void. His crew had run to the escape pods following the training they had practiced 1,000 times. He had been the last to leave, making sure everyone else got out first. That was what commanders did. They saved their people, even when it meant they might not save themselves. Now, he was alone. The other pods had stopped sending signals hours ago. Their power had run out, or their life support had failed, or maybe the people inside had just given up. SCI-FI did not blame them. The Velthari were warriors, but even warriors knew when a fight was lost. His own pod was not much better. The life support system wheezed and clicked as it tried to keep him alive. The oxygen gauge showed 12% and falling. The heat had stopped working and cold was creeping into his bones. His stomach ached from hunger, but the food supplies had been damaged in the escape. Everything tasted like metal and despair. The worst part was the silence. Space was supposed to be quiet, but SCI-FI had never noticed before. On his ship, there had always been sounds. Engines humming, computers beeping, crew members talking and laughing. Now there was nothing but his own breathing and the slow tick of dying machinery. He had sent out distress signals for 3 days straight. The emergency beacon pulsed every few seconds, crying out into the emptiness. But this sector of space was empty. No colonies, no trade routes, no patrol ships. The nearest Confederation base was weeks away, and they had bigger problems than one lost commander. The war with the Korth was going badly. Every ship and every soldier was needed elsewhere. SCI-FI pulled up the star charts on his failing computer. The screen flickered and sparked, but he could still see the map. They were in the middle of nowhere, floating in a graveyard of twisted metal and frozen bodies. Even if someone wanted to rescue him, they would never think to look here. This place had no name, no value, no reason for anyone to visit. He thought about his family back on Veltar Prime. His mate Sira would be waiting for news. His children would ask why Daddy had not come home. The military would tell them he died with honor, fighting for the Confederation. They would give Sira a medal and a pension, and maybe name a street after him someday. It was better than some fates, but it felt hollow now. The pod shuddered and another warning light came on. The navigation system was failing too. Soon he would be drifting blind, unable to even know where he was. The irony made him laugh, though the sound came out as more of a wheeze. He was a starship commander who had traveled to 100 worlds, and now he could not even tell which way was up. SCI-FI closed his eyes and tried to remember better times. The academy, where he had learned to be a soldier. His first command, a small patrol ship that had seemed like the most important vessel in the fleet. The day he met Sira, and the way she had smiled when he told her about the stars. The birth of his children and how they had looked at him like he could protect them from anything. Maybe he had protected them in a way. The Stellar Dawn had died, but they had hurt the Korth ships too. Every enemy vessel they destroyed was one less threat to the worlds behind them. His crew had fought well, and their sacrifice had meant something. It was not victory, but it was honor. The oxygen alarm started beeping faster. 9% now, maybe 2 hours left, if he was lucky. SCI-FI reached for the communications panel and began recording his final message. His voice was weak but steady. This is Commander SCI-FI of the Confederation Navy. If anyone finds this recording, know that we fought well. The crew of the Stellar Dawn died as warriors, defending our people from the Korth invasion. Tell our families that we faced the void, without fear, and our spirits will watch over them from the eternal stars. He paused, trying to think of something else to say, something wise or inspiring, the kind of words that commanders were supposed to leave behind. But his mind felt foggy, and breathing was getting harder. In the end, he just said what was in his heart. I wish I could have seen home one more time. SCI-FI closed the recording and leaned back in his seat. The pod felt even smaller now, like a tomb closing around him. He had done everything he could. Now all that was left was to wait for the end with dignity. That was when the proximity sensor started beeping. At first, he thought it was another malfunction. The pod systems had been failing all day, but the beeping was steady and strong, and the sensor screen showed something impossible. A ship was approaching, moving fast through the debris field. It was not a Korth vessel or a Confederation rescue ship. The computer could not identify it at all. SCI-FI stared at the screen, hardly daring to believe what he was seeing. After 3 days of silence and death, something was coming toward him through the dark. He did not know what it was, or if it would help him. But for the first time since the battle, he felt something other than despair. He felt hope. Jake Morrison was drinking coffee and reading salvage reports when the proximity alarm went off. The bridge of the Lucky Strike was small and cramped, filled with jury-rigged equipment and the smell of recycled air. Jake liked it that way. Big. Ships meant big crews, and big crews meant politics. He preferred to keep things simple. "Captain, I'm getting some weird readings from Sector 7, called Sam Torres from the navigation station. She was young, maybe 25, with short black hair and quick hands that danced over her controls. Looks like there was a battle here recently. Lots of debris and some of it still warm." Jake set down his coffee mug and walked over to look at Sam's screen. The display showed a cloud of twisted metal spreading across several thousand kilometers. Ship parts, weapons fragments, and what looked like the remains of at least 6 vessels floated in the dark. It was a scavenger's dream, the kind of find that could pay for fuel and food for months. "Any idea who was fighting?" Jake asked. "Negative, sir. The computer doesn't recognize the ship designs, but I'm picking up some energy signatures that look like escape pods." Sam's voice got more excited. "And a few of them still have life signs." Jake rubbed his jaw. Most species had rescue protocols. If there were survivors floating out here, their own people should have come for them by now. Either they were too far from help, or nobody cared enough to look. Both possibilities made him uncomfortable. "How long since the battle?" he asked. "Based on the debris spread and heat signatures, maybe 3 days. Whatever happened here, it was nasty." Lisa Hayes looked up from her engineering station. She was older than Sam, with graying brown hair and oil stains on her jumpsuit. She had been working on the salvage arm motors all morning, and her hands were black with grease. "If there are survivors, they won't last much longer," Lisa said. 3 days in an escape pod means their life support is nearly gone. We need to move fast if we're going to help them." Bobby Clark spoke up from the medical station. He was the ship's doctor, a thin man with gentle eyes and steady hands. His medical bay was tiny, barely big enough for one patient, but he had saved more lives than Jake could count. "I can treat most humanoid species with what we have," Bobby said. "But if there's something exotic, I might need to get creative." "Do we know what we're dealing with?" Sam shook her head. "The pod designs are completely unknown, could be anyone." Jake stared at the screen, thinking. The Lucky Strike was a salvage ship, not a rescue vessel. They had limited supplies, limited space, and limited time. If they stopped to help these survivors, they would use up resources they might need later. It was not good business. On the other hand, Jake had been in bad spots before. He knew what it felt like to be alone and desperate, waiting for help that might never come. His crew knew it too. They were all outcasts in their own way, people who had found each other when nobody else wanted them. "Sam, set course for the nearest pod with life signs. Lisa, get the salvage bay ready to receive survivors. Bobby, prep the medical bay for unknown species treatment." Jake sat back down in his captain's chair. "We're going to do the decent thing." Aye, Captain," Sam said, already plotting their course. The Lucky Strike turned toward the debris field, her engines humming with quiet power. They reached the first pod 20 minutes later. It was a strange design, angular and covered with what looked like scales. The metal was pitted and scarred, and several systems were sparking and failing. Through the small viewport, Jake could see a figure inside. "Life signs are weak but stable," Bobby reported. "Looks like some kind of reptilian species, big guy, maybe 7 feet tall." "Can we dock with it?" Jake asked. Lisa ran her scanner over the pod. "The docking collar is a non-standard design, but I can rig something. Give me 10 minutes. While Lisa worked, Jake studied the figure in the pod. The alien wore what looked like a military uniform, dark blue with silver markings. Even unconscious, he looked dignified somehow, like a soldier who had seen too much war but never given up fighting. "Got it," Lisa announced. "Docking collar is attached and sealed. Atmosphere is compatible, mostly nitrogen-oxygen. We can bring him aboard." Jake and Bobby put on their emergency suits and cycled through the airlock. The inside of the pod was cramped and filled with acrid smoke. Warning lights flashed red, and the life support system made grinding noises that did not sound healthy. The alien was unconscious, but breathing. His skin was covered in fine scales that shifted from green to brown, and he had a pronounced ridge running down the center of his skull. He was bigger than a human with broad shoulders and long limbs, but he looked fragile somehow, like he had been stretched too thin. "Help me get him out of here," Bobby said, checking the alien's pulse with a handheld scanner. "His vitals are all over the place, but he's alive." They carefully lifted the alien out of his pod and carried him to the Lucky Strike's medical bay. Bobby immediately went to work, connecting monitors and setting up an IV drip. The alien's biology was different from human, but not so different that Bobby could not help him. "Will he make it?" Jake asked. "I think so. He's dehydrated and suffering from oxygen deprivation, but nothing I can't fix. The bigger question is, what we do when he wakes up. We don't know if his people are friendly or hostile." Jake watched the alien's chest rise and fall under the medical bay's bright lights. The uniform suggested military, which could mean trouble, but the alien had been left to die in a pod, abandoned by his own side. That suggested he might be grateful for rescue, regardless of who provided it. "We treat him like a guest until he gives us reason to do otherwise," Jake decided. "How many other pods are out there?" Sam's voice came over the intercom. "I count 4 more with life signs, Captain, but they're scattered across the debris field, and some of them are in bad shape." Jake nodded. "Then we better get moving. Bobby, keep our guests stable." Lisa prepped the cargo bay for more survivors. Sam plot a course to the next pod. As the Lucky Strike moved through the wreckage, Jake wondered what they were getting themselves into. Rescuing unknown aliens from a mysterious battle was not exactly standard salvage procedure. But something about the dignity of that sleeping figure made him feel like they were doing the right thing. Besides, everyone deserved a chance to go home. SCI-FI woke up to the sound of unfamiliar voices speaking in a language he had never heard before. His head felt heavy, and his mouth tasted like metal, but he was breathing clean air for the first time in days. The surface beneath him was soft, much softer than the hard seat of his escape pod. He opened his eyes slowly, expecting to see the cramped interior of his pod, or maybe the sterile white walls of a Confederation medical bay. Instead, he found himself in a small room with curved walls and dim lighting. Medical equipment hummed quietly around him, but the designs were completely unknown. This was not a Velthari ship, and it certainly was not Korth. A human face appeared above him, pale and concerned. The creature had brown hair streaked with gray and wore a simple blue uniform. SCI-FI had never seen anything like it before. The being was smaller than most spacefaring species, with soft features and no visible weapons or armor. It looked almost fragile. "Easy there, big guy," the human said in accented but understandable galactic standard. "You're safe now. My name is Bobby Clark, and I'm a doctor. You've been unconscious for about 6 hours." SCI-FI tried to sit up, but his body felt weak and unsteady. Bobby gently pressed him back down with surprisingly strong hands. "Where am I?" SCI-FI asked, his voice coming out as a rough whisper. "You're aboard the Lucky Strike, a salvage vessel. We found you floating in an escape pod and brought you aboard." Your life support was about to fail completely. Zexai's mind raced. A salvage ship meant civilians, not military. But what species were these beings? Their ship was unknown, their language unfamiliar, and their appearance unlike anything in the Confederation databases. "What species are you?" he asked. Bobby smiled, showing small white teeth. "We're humans, and you are?" "Commander Zexai of the Velthari Confederation Navy." The words came out automatically, along with the formal surrender protocol he had been trained to use. "I yield myself as prisoner of war and request treatment according to the galactic conventions." Bobby looked confused. "Prisoner?" Nobody said anything about prisoners. "You're a guest here, Commander. We just pulled you out of a bad situation." Before Zexai could respond, another human entered the medical bay. This one was taller with short blonde hair and captain's stripes on his uniform. He carried a steaming cup in his hands and moved with the easy confidence of someone used to command. "Glad to see you're awake," the human said. "I'm Jake Morrison, captain of this vessel. How are you feeling?" Zexai studied the human captain carefully. Jake looked young for a commander, maybe 40 standard years, with laugh lines around his eyes and a relaxed posture. Nothing about him suggested the rigid discipline Zexai expected from military officers. "I am functional," Zexai replied cautiously. "Captain Morrison, I must ask what you intend to do with me and my surviving crew members." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Do with you? We plan to patch you up, feed you a decent meal, and help you contact your people. What did you think we were going to do?" The casual attitude puzzled Zexai. In his experience, unknown ships meant either allies or enemies. There was no middle ground in wartime, yet these humans seemed to treat his rescue as a simple matter of basic decency. "Are humans allied with the Confederation?" Zexai asked. "Never. Heard of them," Jake admitted. "We're pretty new to this whole galactic community thing. Most species haven't heard of us either." "Then why did you rescue me?" Jake shrugged. "Because you needed help. Nobody deserves to die alone in the black, especially not when we could do something about it." The simple answer stunned Zexai. In Confederation space, rescue operations were calculated based on strategic value, available resources, and military necessity. Personal feelings rarely entered the equation. The idea of risking lives and resources for complete strangers was almost incomprehensible. "What do you want in return?" Zexai asked. "Nothing," Jake said, then paused. "Well, maybe you could tell us what happened out there. We found the remains of a pretty big battle, and it might help us avoid whoever did that to your ships." Before Zexai could answer, alarms started blaring throughout the ship. Jake's relaxed expression instantly became alert and focused. He touched a communication device on his collar. "Sam, report." A female voice crackled through the comm. "Captain, we've got company. Long-range sensors show multiple ships approaching fast. The computer identifies them as the same type that fought the battle here." Zexai felt his blood turn cold. "Korth," he whispered. "What?" Jake asked. "The Korth Empire. They were the ones who destroyed my fleet. If they are returning, it means they detected your ship." Zexai struggled to sit up despite Bobby's protests. "Captain Morrison, you must leave immediately. The Korth do not take prisoners, and they consider mercy a weakness. They will destroy your ship and everyone aboard." Jake's expression hardened. "How many ships are we talking about?" "I count 12 vessels," Sam's voice reported. "All military configuration, and they're moving to surround us." Zexai watched Jake's face, expecting to see panic or fear. Instead, the human captain looked thoughtful, like he was working through a difficult problem. It was not the reaction Zexai had expected. "Options?" Jake asked over the comm. "We could run," came another voice, probably the engineer. "But they're faster than us, and they've got us boxed in pretty tight." "We could try hiding in the debris field," Sam suggested. "Lots of interference from all the wreckage." Jake nodded slowly. "Good thinking. Lisa, can you rig some charges from the mining equipment? If we're going to play hide and seek, we might need some distractions." "Already on it, Captain." Zexai stared at the humans in amazement. Faced with impossible odds against a superior enemy, they were not surrendering or begging for mercy. They were planning to fight back using whatever tools they had available. It was either very brave or very stupid. "Captain Morrison," Zexai said urgently, "you do not understand. The Korth are a military empire with advanced weapons and trained warriors. Your salvage ship cannot hope to defeat them in battle." Jake looked at him with a slight smile. "Commander, you're probably right. But here's the thing about humans. We don't always do the smart thing. Sometimes we do the right thing instead." He turned toward the door, then paused. "Bobby, get our guest and the other survivors secured. This might get bumpy." As Jake left to take command of his ship, Zexai realized he was witnessing something he had never seen before. These humans were about to risk their lives to protect strangers from a species they had never encountered, against enemies they could not possibly defeat. It made no strategic sense whatsoever, and somehow that made it the most honorable thing Zexai had ever witnessed. The Lucky Strike shook as the first Korth energy blasts hit her shields. Jake gripped his captain's chair and watched the tactical display as 12 enemy ships moved to surround them. The Korth vessels were sleek and black, built for war, while his ship was a converted mining vessel held together with spare parts and hope. "Shields at 60%, Lisa called out from engineering. "Those hits packed a punch, but we're still in one piece." Jake nodded and opened a channel to the medical bay. "Bobby, how are our passengers?" "Secured and stable, Captain. The Velthari commander wants to talk to you." "Put him through." Zexai's voice came over the intercom, strained but determined. "Captain Morrison, you must abandon us and save your crew. The Korth will not stop until we are all dead. There is no honor in throwing away lives for prisoners." "You're not prisoners," Jake replied firmly. "You're guests, and humans don't abandon guests." Another barrage hit the ship, stronger this time. The lights flickered and sparks flew from damaged consoles. Sam wrestled with the navigation controls, using the debris field as cover while Lisa's explosive charges created false targets and confusion. "This is insane," Zexai said over the comm. "Your species has no stake in this conflict. Why are you risking everything for strangers?" Jake thought about the question as he watched the Korth ships closing in. It was a fair point. The smart thing would be to surrender or flee, to let the galaxy's problems sort themselves out. But Jake had never been particularly smart about these things. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. The Lucky Strike dived behind, a large piece of wreckage, using it as a shield. Lisa's charges detonated in sequence, creating a wall of fire and metal that confused the Korth sensors. For a moment, they had breathing room. "Captain," Sam said, studying her displays, "I'm picking up something strange from the Korth fleet. Their formation is breaking up, some of the ships are pulling back." Jake frowned. "Why would they do that?" Zexai's voice came back on the comm, filled with amazement. "Captain, I am monitoring their communications. The Korth commanders are arguing among themselves. They have never seen tactics like yours before. Some of them think you are using Velthari survivors as bait for a trap." "Are we?" Jake asked with a slight grin. "In a sense, yes, but not the way they think." The Lucky Strike's sensors showed 3 Korth ships advancing while the others held back. Jake saw an opportunity and took it. "Sam, micro-jump us to grid 77. Lisa, prepare the mining charges for manual detonation." "Got it, Captain." The ship vanished in a flash of light and reappeared behind the advancing Korth vessels. Lisa triggered the charges, sending chunks of debris flying into the enemy formation. One Korth ship took a direct hit and spiraled away, its engines trailing fire. "Impossible," came a growling voice over the open channel. "What manner of warriors? Are these humans?" Jake keyed his communicator to broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel Lucky Strike. We're not warriors. We're salvage operators who happened to find some people who needed help." There was silence for a long moment. Then the same Korth voice replied, "You fight to defend aliens that are not your species. This is not logical." "Maybe not," Jake admitted, "but it's what we do." The tactical display showed the Korth ships reforming, but their attack pattern was different now, more cautious, more confused. They had been expecting standard military tactics. not the improvised guerrilla warfare of a desperate salvage crew. "Captain," Zexai said over the comm, "may I suggest something? I'm listening." The Korth respect strength and courage above all else. They have never encountered a species that fights to protect others without personal gain. This confuses them. Perhaps we can use that confusion. Jake raised an eyebrow. "What did you have in mind?" "Challenge them to single combat. It is an ancient Korth tradition, one they have not seen honored in many years. If you can defeat their champion, they will be bound by honor to withdraw. And if I lose, then we all die. But we die with honor, which is more than the Korth usually allow." Jake considered the proposal. It was risky, probably suicidal, but it might be their only chance. The Lucky Strike could not survive much longer against the Korth fleet, and running was no longer an option. "Patch me through to the Korth commander," Jake said. Moments later, a harsh voice filled the bridge. "This is War Leader Thakmor of the Korth Empire. Surrender now and your deaths will be swift." "This is Captain Morrison. I challenge you to single combat. Champion against champion. Winner takes all. Do the Korth still have honor, or have you forgotten your own traditions?" The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Jake could hear his crew holding their breath, waiting for the response that would determine their fate. Finally, Thakmor spoke again, his voice filled with something that might have been respect. "It has been many cycles since anyone dared invoke the old ways. Very well, human, choose your champion and meet us on the asteroid designated as neutral ground. If your champion falls, all survivors become our prisoners. If ours falls, or if yours falls, you withdraw and leave us in peace." Jake finished. "Agreed. You have 1 hour to prepare." The channel closed, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Sam looked at Jake with worried eyes. "Captain, who's going to be our champion?" Jake stood up and checked his sidearm. "I am." "Sir, that's suicide," Lisa protested. "The Korth are bigger, stronger, and they've been bred for warfare." "Maybe," Jake said. "But I've got something they don't expect." "What's that?" Bobby asked over the comm. Jake smiled grimly as he headed for the armory. "I'm too stubborn to quit." As the Lucky Strike moved toward the asteroid, Zexai found himself filled with emotions he had never experienced before. These humans were about to risk everything for people they barely knew, people from a species they had never heard of until today. In all his years of military service, Zexai had never seen courage like this. Not the calculated bravery of soldiers following orders, but the pure, simple courage of people who refuse to abandon others in need. Whatever happened in the next hour, Zexai knew he would never forget the day he learned what it meant to be human. The asteroid was cold and airless, a chunk of rock floating in the darkness between the two fleets. Jake stood on its surface in his environmental suit, watching the Korth champion emerge from his landing craft. The alien was massive, nearly 8 feet tall and covered in thick armor that gleamed like black metal. Cybernetic implants glowed red along his arms and spine, and his movements spoke of deadly training. Jake checked his own equipment one last time. Standard human combat gear, a plasma rifle, and a gravity belt to help him move in the asteroid's weak pull. He looked small and fragile compared to his opponent, but he had faced worse odds before. "I am Crextar, champion of the Korth Empire," the alien announced, his voice booming across the comm channel. "I have killed warriors from 17 different species. You will be the 18th. "Jake Morrison, salvage captain," Jake replied calmly. "I've survived 3 ship explosions, 2 pirate attacks, and my ex-wife's cooking. Let's get this over with." The Korth champion paused, confused by Jake's casual tone. Most beings showed fear or anger before battle. This human seemed almost bored. "You mock me," Crextar growled. "Not really. Just trying to keep things light." They faced each other across 50 meters of rocky ground. The rules were simple. Weapons allowed. No outside interference, fight until one could no longer continue. Jake could see both fleets watching from orbit, waiting to see which species would claim victory. "Begin," came War Leader Thakmor's voice, over the comm. Crextar moved first, raising his massive energy cannon and firing a blast that could have destroyed a small building. Jake was already rolling behind a boulder when the shot hit, sending rock fragments flying in all directions. The Korth champion advanced steadily, firing shot after shot with mechanical precision. Each blast carved chunks out of Jake's cover, slowly wearing it away. Jake waited, counting shots and studying his opponent's movements. When Crextar paused to check his weapon's charge, Jake made his move. He sprinted from cover, zigzagging, across the uneven ground as energy blasts sizzled past his head. The low gravity helped him move faster than the heavy Korth expected. Jake's plasma rifle barked twice, hitting Crextar's armor and leaving glowing scorch marks, but doing no real damage. The champion laughed and swung his massive fist, missing Jake by inches as the human ducked and rolled away. "You are fast, little human, but you cannot hurt me. Surrender now, and I will make your death quick." Jake didn't answer. He was too busy studying the asteroid's surface, looking for something he could use. The rock was ancient and unstable, with deep cracks running through its core. An idea began to form in his mind. He fired his rifle again, not at Crextar, but at the ground near the champion's feet. The plasma bolt carved into the rock, following one of the natural cracks. Crextar stumbled slightly as the surface shifted beneath him. "Missed again?" the Korth taunted. "Did I?" Jake asked. He fired 3 more shots in quick succession, each one targeting a different crack in the asteroid's surface. The rock began to groan and shift as the natural stress points weakened. Crextar looked around nervously as small pieces of debris started floating away. "What are you doing?" the champion demanded. "Physics," Jake replied, and fired his final shot directly into the largest crack. The asteroid shuddered and split along its fault lines. The section where Crextar stood broke away from the main body, spinning slowly into space. The Korth champions, heavy armor designed for strength rather than mobility, became a liability in the shifting gravity field. Jake used his gravity belt to anchor himself to the stable part of the asteroid while Crextar flailed helplessly, trying to reach solid ground. The champion's energy cannon was useless now. Any shot powerful enough to reach Jake would destabilize his own piece of rock even further. "Impossible," Crextar snarled. "You fight without honor. A true warrior would face me directly." Jake pulled out his sidearm, a simple projectile weapon, and aimed it carefully. Honor doesn't mean being stupid. It means protecting the people who trust you. The bullet struck Crextar's weapon, shattering its power core. The explosion sent the Korth champion tumbling end over end into the void, his armor's thrusters unable to compensate for the blast. Jake activated his suit's emergency beacon and waited. Within minutes, a Korth rescue pod arrived to collect their defeated champion. Crextar was alive but helpless, floating unconscious in his damaged armor. The comm channel crackled with war leader Thakmor's voice. "The human has won. By the ancient laws, we withdraw." But Jake wasn't finished. He opened a channel to the entire Korth fleet. "Wait, I want to return your champion." Silence filled the comm channel. Finally, Thakmor spoke again, his voice filled with confusion. "Return him? He has been defeated. His life is forfeit according to our laws." "Not according to ours," Jake said firmly. "Among humans, we don't kill defeated enemies. We help them." Jake guided the rescue pod toward the Korth fleet, using his suit's limited thrusters. It was a slow journey, but he made sure Crextar reached his own people safely. When the pod docked with the Korth flagship, Thakmor himself came on the comm. "Human Captain Morrison, you have shown mercy to a defeated enemy. This is unprecedented. Why do you spare him?" "Because that's what civilized people do," Jake replied. "We fight when we have to, but we don't kill when we don't have to." The Korth fleet began to withdraw as promised, but several ships lingered. Over the next hour, Jake received more communications from Korth commanders than he knew what to do with. They asked questions about human philosophy, human tactics, human values. Some seemed angry, others confused, but all seemed affected by what they had witnessed. Back aboard the Lucky Strike, SCI-FI stood in the observation lounge watching the last Korth ships disappear into hyperspace. Jake found him there an hour later, staring out at the stars. "Commander, how are you feeling?" Jake asked. Changed, SCI-FI replied quietly. In all my years of military service, I have never seen anything like what happened today. You defeated an enemy through cleverness rather than force, then showed mercy when you could have claimed vengeance. Jake shrugged. Just seemed like the right thing to do. That is exactly what I mean, SCI-FI said, turning to face the human captain. Most species would have calculated the strategic value, weighed the risks and benefits. You simply did what felt right. What will you do now? Jake asked. SCI-FI was quiet for a long moment. I will return to Confederation space, but not to resume my old duties. What I have learned here must be shared. The galaxy needs to know about humanity, about your way of thinking. Think it will make a difference? I believe it already has, SCI-FI replied, gesturing toward the space where the Korth fleet had been. Some of those ships left with questions they never had before, seeds of doubt about their own methods. That is how change begins, one mind at a time. 3 months later, reports began filtering through the galactic networks about strange incidents in Korth space. Ships sparing defeated enemies, commanders showing mercy to prisoners. Some called it weakness, others called it evolution. But in the cargo bay of the Lucky Strike, now heading toward human space with a full load of valuable salvage, Jake Morrison was just glad to be alive. He had no idea that his simple act of decency had started something that would reshape the galaxy. After all, that's what humans did. They helped people, they did the right thing, and they never left anyone behind, even when it seemed impossible. Commander Alex Donovan stared at the official decree on his screen. His hands trembled slightly as he read it for the third time. The words remained the same, but he still couldn't believe them. By unanimous vote of the Galactic Council, all human military forces are hereby banned from participation in any interstellar conflict. Earth vessels are restricted to defensive operations within Sol system only. The Galactic Council chambers fell silent as the final vote was tallied. Humans sat on one side of the Grand Hall, representatives from 26 alien species on the other. The division wasn't just physical, it was philosophical. Alex watched as Admiral Laura Bennett, Earth's highest-ranking officer, stood to address the council. Her uniform was crisp, but her face showed the strain of the past 3 months. We came when you called for help, she said, her voice steady despite her obvious anger. We sacrificed our ships and our people to stop the Krell invasion. And this is how you thank us? The massive Dralken representative, Ambassador Kolath, rose from his seat. His 4 arms were held in a formal posture of respect, but his voice carried a hint of fear. The vote is not about gratitude, Admiral, it is about methods. In the Battle of Proxima Centauri, your forces deliberately vented reactor plasma to create a trap for pursuing Krell ships. A trap that worked, Laura countered. A trap that killed every living being in that system's outer belt mining colonies, Kolath said. Your captain didn't even check if evacuation was complete. Alex remembered that battle. Captain Frank Martinez had made a hard call, sacrificed 2,000 to save 2 billion. No human commander questioned the math. But the aliens did. Ambassador Zilthar of the Ashari Conclave stood next. The slender, blue-skinned diplomat's voice was gentle but firm. Humans don't calculate odds, Zilthar said. You just decide to win, no matter the cost. Your species treats war differently than the rest of us. You don't see it as a political tool or a last resort. You see it as a problem to be solved by any means necessary. Alex couldn't argue with that. Humanity had entered the galactic stage just 5 years ago when a Krell scouting fleet entered Sol system. Earth's United Defense Forces had destroyed them in days, using tactics the aliens considered barbaric, but effective. When the full Krell Dominion launched their campaign to conquer Council space a year later, humanity was invited to join the fight. The Council had expected Earth to contribute a few ships, some resources. Instead, humanity threw everything they had into the war. They converted passenger ships into carriers, mining tools into weapons, and civilian stations into fortresses. The Yao, Krell expected to face the methodical, rule-bound Council forces. Instead, they met humans who fought without concern for themselves, who sacrificed single ships to destroy larger targets, who used civilian infrastructure as bait to draw enemies into ambushes. In 18 months, the Krell were defeated, but the Council was horrified by humanity's methods. "The ban is effective immediately," announced Grand Counselor Val Sheen. "All human military vessels must return to Sol system within 30 days. Non-compliance will result in further sanctions." Alex looked around the Earth delegation. Some faces showed anger, others resignation. They had known this was coming. 3 days later, Alex sat in the officer's lounge of the Earth defense vessel Intrepid as it prepared to depart Council space. The ship had lost 40% of its crew in the final battle against the Krell flagship. Those who remained were mostly quiet as they watched news feeds from across the galaxy. "They're calling us savages," said Lieutenant Samantha Powell, sliding into the seat across from Alex. She pushed a tablet toward him displaying headlines from various alien news sources. "Humans, too dangerous to fight alongside. Council bans reckless Earth forces, the species that knows no limits in war." Alex pushed the tablet away. "We won their war for them." "That's the problem," said a voice from behind. Captain Olivia Wells joined them, her face showing the fatigue they all felt. "We showed them something they didn't want to see." "What's that, Captain?" Alex asked. "That their rules of war don't work against an enemy that doesn't play by the rules," she said, taking a seat. "The Krell would have wiped them out if they kept fighting with their neat battle formations and their careful proportional responses." Samantha nodded. "So they're scared of us because we fight dirty?" "They're scared of us because we don't see it as fighting dirty," Olivia corrected. "We see it as surviving." Alex thought about the Battle of Proxima Centauri again, about Captain Martinez making the call to sacrifice those miners, about how every human officer understood the decision, while every alien ally was horrified. Not by the deaths. The galaxy was no stranger to casualties, but by the casual way humans accepted them as necessary. "What happens now?" he asked. "We go home," Olivia said simply. "We develop our technology, strengthen our defenses, and wait." "Wait for what?" Samantha asked. "For the day they need us again," Olivia replied. "Because they will. The galaxy is too big and too dangerous for their careful approach to last forever." As Earth's fleet made its way home, delegations from across Council space watched them depart. Some with relief, others with concern. In private chambers, debates had already begun about whether the ban was wise. Ambassador Zilthar sat with Grand Counselor Val Sheen in her private study. "They saved us," Zilthar said quietly. "At what cost?" Val Sheen replied. "Their methods break every ethical code we have established for warfare. Perhaps our codes were made for a more civilized time," Zilthar suggested. "The Krell showed no mercy, followed no rules, and neither did the humans," Val Sheen said. "That is precisely why they are dangerous." Zilthar looked out at the departing Earthships, visible as tiny points of light against the blackness of space. "I fear we may have made a terrible mistake," he said. "Not because we need their protection, but because we have just shown every potential enemy in the galaxy that humans are the species to fear. We have painted a target on their world." Val Sheen nodded slowly. "Perhaps, but the vote is done. The humans will return to their system, and the galaxy will have time to forget their methods." But as Commander Alex Donovan's ship jumped to faster than light speed heading back to Earth, he knew the galaxy wouldn't forget, and neither would humanity. "We'll be back," he whispered to himself. "And next time, they'll understand why we fight the way we do." The fleet returned to a hero's welcome on Earth. News of the ban spread quickly, but instead of outrage, Alex was surprised to find most humans simply shrugged it off. "Let them handle their own wars then," was the common response. "We'll take care of our own." But deep in secure facilities across Earth, military planners were already at work. If humanity couldn't fight alongside the galactic community, they would prepare to fight alone. And somewhere beyond known space, forces were gathering that would make the Krell look like a minor threat. Forces that wouldn't follow rules of engagement or honor surrenders. Forces that would test the Council's ban on human warfare to its breaking point. 50 years passed since the ban. Earth turned inward, developing its technology in isolation. The old warriors like Commander Alex Donovan had long since retired or passed away. A new generation of humans had grown up hearing stories about the galaxy but never experiencing it firsthand. Captain Olivia Donovan stood on the bridge of the Earth defense vessel Relentless, staring at the stars through the main viewport. At 45, she had her grandfather's strong jaw and determined eyes. She had joined Earth's defense forces to follow in his footsteps, though the missions had changed. No more grand battles across the stars, just patrols of the Sol system and occasional escort duties for the few merchant ships allowed to trade with nearby Council worlds. "Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission," said Lieutenant Eric Barnes from the communications station. It's from the Galactic Council." Olivia turned sharply. The Council rarely contacted Earth directly these days. "On screen," she ordered. The face that appeared was blue-skinned with large silver eyes. An Ashari. But not just any Ashari. This was Ambassador Treljar, son of the famous Zilthar, who had been present at the Council meeting that banned humans 50 years ago. "Captain Donovan," Treljar said, his voice carrying the musical quality typical of his species. "I am contacting you on a matter of extreme urgency. The Council requests Earth's immediate assistance." Olivia kept her face neutral. "Ambassador, Earth has honored the ban for 50 years. What assistance could you possibly need that doesn't violate your own rules?" Treljar's silver eyes darkened slightly, a sign of distress in Ashari. 3 months ago, a new species entered Council space from the Cygnus arm. We call them the Void Swarm. They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They simply consume. Behind her, Olivia heard her crew shifting uneasily. They had all trained for war their entire careers, but none had seen actual combat. "How many worlds?" she asked quietly. 17 completely lost. 12 more under attack. The Council's peacekeeping forces have been systematically overwhelmed. The Void Swarm adapts to our tactics faster than we can develop new ones. Olivia walked closer to the screen. "And now you want the savages to help you?" Treljar showed no offense at her bluntness. "The Council has voted. We are not asking for your military. The ban remains. We are asking for observers, advisors, 12 humans with combat experience to observe our operations and provide perspective." "Perspective," Olivia repeated flatly. "You want our ideas, but not our ships or soldiers." "Those are the terms the Council approved," Treljar replied. "I pushed for more, but fear and pride are powerful forces, Captain." Olivia thought for a moment. "I'll need to consult with Earth Command." "Of course. But please hurry. The Thalasian homeworld fell yesterday. 8 billion souls. The evacuation ships didn't even make it out of orbit." The transmission ended and Olivia turned to her XO, Commander Paul Wright. "What do you think?" she asked. Paul's eyes were hard. "I think they're desperate but still too proud to admit they need us. They want our brains but not our guns." "That's how I see it too," Olivia said. "Set course for Earth. I want to make this pitch to command in person." 3 weeks later, 12 humans prepared to board a Council diplomatic vessel in Earth orbit. Lieutenant Ryan Miller checked his luggage one last time. No weapons, the Council had been very clear about that. Just observation equipment, data pads, and civilian clothes. "Ready for this?" asked Chief Science Officer Heather Caldwell as she joined him in the shuttle bay. Ryan shrugged. "Ready to watch aliens fight a losing war while we take notes?" "Not really." Heather smiled grimly. "That's not why we're going." "No?" Ryan raised an eyebrow. "No," she said firmly. "We're going because Captain Donovan believes the Council will eventually have no choice but to ask for real help. And when they do, we need to already be out there with intelligence on the enemy." The Council ship that collected them was sleek and beautiful, with none of the practical armor or weapon mounts that characterized Earth vessels. The Ashari captain, Krelvos, treated them with polite distance. "You will be divided among our flagship vessels," he explained as they entered faster-than-light travel. 2 humans per battle group. You will observe, report your findings to council commanders but not interfere in operations. Ryan and Heather were assigned to the Thalasian flagship Dawn Eternal, the largest vessel in the council's fleet. Its commander, Admiral Kylezin, met them in the ship's grand receiving hall. Like all Thalasians, he was tall and thin with iridescent skin that shifted colors slightly with his moods. Currently, it had a grayish tinge that Ryan guessed meant stress or fatigue. Welcome aboard, Kylezin said without warmth. Your quarters are on Deck 7. You will have access to the observation deck during battles, but not the command center. That will make it difficult for us to provide useful insights, Heather pointed out. Those are my orders, Kylezin replied. The council wants your observations, not your direct involvement in tactical decisions. 3 days later, Ryan stood on the observation deck as the Dawn Eternal and its battle group engaged a portion of the Void Swarm near the Procyon system. The swarm ships were bizarre, part organic, part mechanical, shaped like elongated insects with multiple segments. Ryan watched as the council fleet executed a perfect pincer movement, surrounding a group of smaller swarm vessels. For a moment, it seemed like the tactic might work. Then, with startling speed, the swarm ships changed formation, linking together to form a larger structure that fired massive energy beams through the council formation. 3 council ships were destroyed. In seconds, the rest broke formation and retreated. They're fighting with perfect military doctrine, Ryan noted to Heather as they reviewed the battle footage later in their quarters. That's the problem, she replied. The swarm adapts to patterns. They need chaos. Ryan nodded. They need us. They submitted their observation report suggesting more unpredictable tactics, but Admiral Kylezin dismissed their input. Council battle doctrine has been refined over thousands of years, he told them stiffly. Over the next 2 months, Ryan and Heather watched as battle after battle ended in retreat. The Void Swarm pushed deeper into Council space, consuming resources and leaving lifeless husks of planets behind. After the fall of Arcturus, a major Council stronghold, Admiral Kylezin finally came to their quarters personally. His skin had turned almost completely gray. Tell me what you would do, he demanded. Ryan's response was simple. Something they won't expect. Heather had been analyzing the swarm's movement patterns for weeks. They adapt to predictability, she explained. But they might have a weakness. They seem to have trouble processing multiple simultaneous threats that don't follow logical patterns. Kylezin looked skeptical. You're suggesting we abandon battle formation? Fight without coordination? I'm suggesting controlled chaos, Heather said. Let each ship captain make independent decisions within an overall strategic framework. That's not how we fight, Kylezin said, but his tone had lost some of its certainty. As the fleet regrouped and prepared for yet another defensive stand, news came that the Thalasian colony of New Hope was next in the swarm's path. A planet with 80 million civilians and evacuation capabilities for barely 1/10 of that number. That night, Ryan and Heather made their decision. The council wasn't ready to listen, but Earth needed to know what they were facing. While the ship's crew slept, they slipped away to the communications center and sent a coded message back to Earth with everything they had learned about the swarm. Then they returned to their quarters to wait. The battle for New Hope was about to begin, and with it, a new chapter in humanity's relationship with the galaxy. The Thalasian flagship Dawn Eternal moved into position above New Hope Colony. From the observation deck, Ryan and Heather watched as the rest of the Council fleet formed a defensive barrier around the planet. Their perfect formation looked impressive, but predictable. Exactly what had failed against the Void Swarm in every previous battle. They're going to lose again, Ryan said quietly. 80 million people down there, and they're using the same tactics that failed at Arcturus. Heather nodded. Her eyes focused on the datapad in her hands. For weeks she had been gathering information on the swarm's behavior patterns, looking for any weakness. Now she showed Ryan what she'd found. Look at this. When the swarm ships connect to form larger structures, there's a 3-second energy surge here and here. She pointed to specific points on the diagram. They're vulnerable during that moment. Have you shown this to Admiral Kylezin? Ryan asked. Twice. He says it's too risky to attack during the transformation. Council doctrine says to retreat when the swarm begins to combine ships. Ryan frowned. That's exactly why they keep losing. They do what the swarm expects. A soft chime from their communication device interrupted them. It was a secure message from Earth. Captain Olivia Donovan's face appeared on the small screen. Lieutenant Miller, Officer Caldwell, we received your data packet. Earth Command has made a decision based on your intelligence. Her expression was grim but determined. The Earth Defense Fleet is mobilizing. 50 ships will arrive at New Hope in approximately 12 hours. You need to prepare the Council fleet. Ryan and Heather exchanged shocked looks. Captain, Ryan replied, the Council hasn't approved military intervention. If Earth sends ships, it violates the ban. Earth Command is aware, Olivia said simply. The decision has been made. 80 million lives are at stake. Prepare the Council commanders as best you can. The transmission ended. Ryan ran a hand through his hair. Well, this changes everything. We need to tell Admiral Kyle Zinn, Heather said. He needs to know Earth ships are coming. When they requested an urgent meeting with the Admiral, they were surprised to be granted immediate access to the command center, something previously forbidden to them. The atmosphere on the bridge was tense. Tactical displays showed the void, swarm approaching, larger than any force they had yet encountered. Admiral Kyle Zinn's skin had paled to an almost white color. You wanted to see me, humans? Ryan stepped forward. Admiral, we've received word from Earth. Our defense fleet is on the way to assist in the defense of New Hope. The command center fell silent. Kyle Zinn's eyes widened. That violates the Council ban? Yes, it does, Heather said calmly. 50 ships will be here in approximately 12 hours. They're coming to help whether the Council approves or not. One of the Thalasian officers spoke up. Admiral, the evacuation ships can only take 7 million people. We need at least 3 days to get them off planet. Kyle Zinn looked at the tactical display again, then back at the humans. What are you suggesting we do? Ryan took a deep breath. Fight differently, right now, before Earth arrives. Give the evacuation ships time. How? Kyle Zinn asked, his voice softer than they had ever heard it. Heather activated her datapad and projected her findings onto the main display. The swarm has a weakness during transformation, a 3-second window where they're vulnerable. But, to exploit it, ships would need to attack independently without central coordination. That goes against all Council battle doctrine, another officer protested. Yes, Ryan said. That's exactly the point. Do what they don't expect you to do. Admiral Kyle Zinn was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to his communications officer. Send a message to all ships. New battle plan. Each captain has independent attack authority. Target the connection points when swarm ships begin to combine. No retreat unless individually necessary. The officer hesitated. Sir, that's against Council protocols. I am aware, Kyle Zinn said, firmly. Do it anyway. 4 hours later, the battle began. From the command center where they were now permitted to stay, Ryan and Heather watched as the Council fleet broke from their traditional formations. Instead of the coordinated movements they had always used, each ship now fought independently, targeting the swarm's connection points during transformation. For the first time, the swarm seemed confused. Their usual adaptive strategy faltered. Against the unpredictable attacks, several smaller swarm ships were destroyed before they could combine. It's working, Heather whispered, but the advantage was temporary. The swarm was massive, and despite the new tactics, they began to push through the Council's defensive line. Ships were lost on both sides, but the swarm had more to spare. Admiral Kyle Zinn watched grimly as his fleet fought bravely but continued to lose ground. How much longer until your ships arrive? He asked Ryan. 8 hours, Ryan replied. Can you hold that long? No, Kyle Zinn said honestly, but we will try. Just then a new alert sounded. One of the officers looked up in surprise. Admiral, we're detecting hyperspace signatures, many ships emerging, but it's not the swarm. Earth vessels? Kyle Zinn asked. No, sir. The signatures are there, council ships, from all member species. On the main screen, hyperspace portals opened all around the battlefield. Dozens, then hundreds of ships appeared, vessels from every council species. They weren't the official council fleet. These were civilian ships, research vessels, even private yachts, all armed with hastily attached weapons. A transmission came through on all channels. The face that appeared was that of Councillor Vareth, an elderly Dralkan who had voted against human involvement 50 years ago. Admiral Kyle Zinn, this is Councillor Vareth. We received your battle data. The council remains in session, arguing about what to do. But many of us couldn't wait for an official decision. We've brought every ship we could find. Kyle Zinn looked stunned. Counselor, these aren't military vessels. No, Vareth agreed, but we watched the humans during the Krell War. We learned something from them after all. Sometimes you must break the rules to save lives. The battle shifted again. The civilian ships fought without military precision, but with a chaotic energy that confused the swarm even further. They targeted the connection points as Heather had suggested, sacrificing smaller ships to protect larger evacuation vessels. With this unexpected reinforcement, the Council forces managed to hold back the swarm. The evacuation of New Hope began in earnest, ships full of civilians breaking through the battle line to safety. Ryan and Heather worked tirelessly on the command center, coordinating between the Council ships and providing tactical suggestions based on their observations of the swarm's reactions. 7 hours into the battle, with the Council forces still holding but beginning to falter, Admiral Kyle Zinn received a new alert. Hyperspace signatures detected, 50 ships emerging. The tactical officer's voice was tense. It's the Earth fleet. The massive Earth dreadnought Defiance led the formation, flanked by warships that Council space hadn't seen in 50 years. They had clearly been improved upon, larger and more heavily armed than during the Krell War. A transmission came through from the Defiance. Captain Jack Reynolds appeared on screen, his expression determined. This is Earth Fleet Command. Stand by for assistance. His eyes met Kyle Zinn's through the transmission. We'll handle this, just stay out of our way. The human fleet moved into positions that violated every tactical doctrine in the Council's manuals, and as they engaged the swarm, the galaxy was reminded why humans had been banned from galactic wars in the first place. The Earth fleet moved with a speed and purpose that stunned even the Council's most experienced commanders. Unlike the perfect formations of Council ships, the human vessels spread out in what seemed like random patterns, constantly changing position. Admiral Kyle Zinn watched from the command center of the Dawn Eternal as the Earth ships engaged the Void Swarm. He turned to Ryan and Heather, who stood nearby studying the tactical displays. What are they doing? He asked. There's no pattern to their movements. That's the point, Ryan explained. They're being unpredictable. The swarm can't adapt to what it can't predict. On the main screen, they watched as the human dreadnought Defiance deliberately took damage to its outer hull, drawing fire from 3 swarm ships. As the swarm concentrated their attack on the Defiance, 5 smaller Earth vessels swooped in, from different angles targeting the exposed connection points Heather had identified. They're using themselves as bait, Kyle Zinn said, his skin changing to a deep blue color of amazement. Heather nodded. Captain Reynolds is drawing their attention while the other ships attack from positions the swarm doesn't expect. The tactic worked. The 5 Earth vessels destroyed the 3 swarm ships before they could combine into a larger structure. But the Defiance had taken significant damage in the process. Why would they sacrifice their flagship like that? One of the Thalasian officers asked. They're not sacrificing it, Ryan said. They're using it. Earth ships are built to take damage and keep fighting. Their hulls are reinforced specifically for this kind of tactic. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Earth vessels positioned themselves in ways that seemed tactically unsound, drawing swarm attacks before revealing it was all part of a larger strategy. Some ships appeared to retreat, only to circle back and strike from unexpected angles. Others worked in small groups that formed and disbanded so quickly the swarm couldn't adapt. Captain Jack Reynolds' voice came through on a general channel. All Council vessels, this is Earth Command. We're going to open a corridor for the civilian evacuation ships. Form up behind our lead vessels and follow our path. Admiral Kylezin hesitated only briefly before responding. Understood, Captain Reynolds. Council fleet will follow your lead. The combined forces began to turn the tide of battle. The evacuation ships, protected by the corridor created by Earth and Council vessels, managed to escape with thousands of civilians aboard. But the swarm was still overwhelming in its numbers, and for every ship they destroyed, more seemed to appear. From their position on the Dawn Eternal, Ryan and Heather continued to analyze the swarm's behavior, sending their observations to both Council commanders and the Earth fleet. As they worked, Heather noticed something in the data. "Look at this," she said to Ryan, pointing to her screen. "The swarm seems to be drawing energy from somewhere. Their power readings are increasing, even though we're destroying their ships." Ryan studied the readings. They must have a central power source, something feeding energy to all the ships. They brought their discovery to Admiral Kylezin, who immediately contacted Captain Reynolds on the Defiance. "Captain, our human observers have detected an energy source feeding the swarm. If we can locate and destroy it, we might be able to weaken the entire force at once." Reynolds's face on the screen was smudged with soot, and sparks flew in the background as his damaged ship continued to fight. "Send me the data," he said. "We'll find it." Working together, Earth and Council ships began scanning for the energy source. It was Heather who finally pinpointed its location, a massive swarm vessel hiding behind the moon of New Hope. "That's their control ship," she announced. "It's directing the smaller vessels and providing them with power." Captain Reynolds's voice came through again. "We've identified the target, but it's heavily protected. We'll need a combined attack to break through." Admiral Kylezin looked at the tactical display. The path to the control ship was heavily guarded by swarm vessels. "It would be a suicide mission," he said quietly. "Not necessarily," Ryan countered. "We just need a diversion. Something big enough to draw most of the swarm away from the control ship." The Admiral's skin changed to a thoughtful green color. "What do you suggest?" Ryan pointed to New Hope's second moon, a small, uninhabited rock rich in minerals. "The swarm consumes resources, right? What if we give them something they can't resist?" Heather caught on immediately. "We could rig the moon with explosives, make it look like we're trying to deny them resources by destroying it." "The swarm would move to stop us," Ryan continued, drawing ships away from the control vessel. Admiral Kylezin considered the plan. It was reckless, dangerous, and exactly the kind of thinking that had gotten humans banned from galactic wars. It was also their best chance to save millions of lives. "How would we detonate an entire moon?" he asked. "We wouldn't actually destroy it," Heather explained. "Just make the swarm think we're about to. A few strategic explosions on the surface would be enough." The plan was quickly communicated to Captain Reynolds, who approved immediately. "Classic human distraction technique," he said with a grim smile. "We'll handle the explosives. Admiral, have your fleet ready to strike the control ship the moment the swarm takes the bait." 6 Earth vessels broke away from the main battle, carrying mining explosives that had been hastily repurposed as weapons. They landed on the small moon and began setting charges while the rest of the Earth and Council fleets continued to fight, protecting the remaining evacuation ships. From the Dawn Eternal, Ryan and Heather watched as the trap was set. "This is exactly why the Council banned us," Ryan said quietly. "We turn anything into a weapon, even a moon." Heather nodded. "And it's exactly why they need us now." The explosives were detonated in sequence, creating massive plumes of dust and rock that shot into space. Sensors across all ships detected the explosions, and as predicted, a large portion of the swarm immediately changed course toward the moon. "They took the bait," Admiral Kylezin announced. "All ships prepare to attack the control vessel." The combined Earth and Council fleets surged toward the now less protected control ship. The Defiance, despite its damage, led the charge. Earth vessels took the brunt of the defensive fire, allowing Council ships to target weak points with precision. As they closed in on the massive control ship, Captain Reynolds's voice came through one last time. "We're going to break through their outer defenses. Be ready to hit the core the moment we create an opening." The Defiance and 3 other Earth vessels accelerated to full speed, aiming directly at the control ship's main defense array. It was a maneuver that no Council commander would ever have approved, a deliberate collision course. At the last possible moment, the Earth ships fired all weapons at a single point, creating a breach in the control ship's defenses. Two of the Earth vessels couldn't pull away in time and crashed into the swarm ship, tearing open a massive hole in its structure. "Now," shouted Admiral Kylezin, "all ships, target the breach." Every remaining vessel in the combined fleet fired into the opening, their weapons reaching the control ship's vulnerable core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a massive energy surge erupted from within the swarm vessel. It began to break apart, massive sections tearing away as internal explosions ripped through its structure. Across the battlefield, the effect was immediate. Smaller swarm ships began to drift aimlessly, their coordination lost. Some simply shut down, while others fired randomly, no longer following any discernible pattern. "We did it," Heather breathed, watching the tactical display as the swarm fell into chaos. The battle wasn't over. There were still hundreds of swarm ships to deal with, but without their control ship, they were no longer an organized force. One by one, the remaining swarm vessels were destroyed or disabled. As the fighting died down, Admiral Kylezin turned to Ryan and Heather. His skin had turned a deep purple color they had never seen before. "Is this what it was like?" he asked, quietly. "During the Krell War?" Ryan nodded. "This is why we fight the way we do. Sometimes the only way to win is to do the unexpected, even if it means breaking the rules." The Admiral looked back at the view screen, where the remnants of both fleets drifted among the debris of the battle. 2 Earth vessels had been completely destroyed in the final attack on the control ship. Dozens more were damaged, including the Defiance. "The Council was wrong to ban you," Kylezin said finally. "But I'm beginning to understand why they did." 2 weeks after the Battle of New Hope, Captain Jack Reynolds stood before the Galactic Council. The Grand Chamber was filled to capacity with representatives from every Council species. Some faces showed gratitude, others wariness, and a few open hostility. The Earth fleet had saved New Hope and destroyed the Void Swarm control ship, but at a cost. 7 human vessels had been lost completely. 23 more, including the Dreadnought Defiance, needed major repairs. 39 human crew members had died, with over 100 injured. Council forces had suffered losses too, but the human sacrifices had drawn the most attention across the galaxy. News had spread quickly about Earthships deliberately taking damage to protect evacuation vessels, about the dangerous moon diversion plan, and about the final attack, where 2 Earthships crashed into the swarm control vessel to create a breach. Grand, Councillor Valsheen, the same Ashari who had announced the ban 50 years earlier, now much older but still commanding respect, addressed Reynolds. "Captain Reynolds, Earth forces entered Council space with armed vessels, directly violating the ban established 50 years ago. The penalties for such violation are severe." Reynolds stood tall, his uniform still bearing scorch marks from the battle. Behind him sat Ryan, Heather, and several other human observers who had been instrumental in the victory. "We were aware of the consequences when we made our decision, Councillor," Reynolds replied. 80 million lives were at stake. We chose to act rather than watch them die. And yet, Valsheen continued, those actions saved not only the citizens of New Hope, but possibly many more worlds that would have fallen to the swarm. The Council finds itself in a difficult position. From his seat near the front of the chamber, Councillor Vareth stood. The elderly Dralkan who had led the civilian fleet at New Hope moved to the center of the floor. "If I may address the Council," he said, his forearms held in a formal gesture. "I was present 50 years ago when we voted to ban humans from our conflicts. I voted in favor of that ban. I believed their methods too extreme, too willing to accept sacrifice." He turned to face Reynolds directly. "I was wrong." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Vareth continued, "At New Hope, I saw what humans truly are. They do not fight as we do because they see war differently. We see it as a political extension, a regrettable necessity conducted with rules and protocols. They see it as survival, pure and simple." He gestured to the human delegation. When a human ship took damage to protect civilian vessels, it wasn't following a tactical doctrine. It was following a moral one. The strong protect the weak, whatever the cost. Ryan leaned toward Heather. Is he defending us? He whispered. I think he's trying to explain us, she replied quietly. Varith wasn't finished. The ban was justified, but not for the reasons we thought. We banned humans because they showed us something uncomfortable, that our civilized rules of warfare are a luxury. Against an enemy like the Krell or the Void Swarm, those rules become a liability. He faced the council again. I propose we maintain the ban, but with an amendment. Humans are prohibited from galactic warfare except in cases of existential threat to civilian populations. The chamber erupted in debate. Some council members argued that any exception would eventually be abused. Others pointed out that without the humans, New Hope would have been lost completely. Throughout the arguments, Captain Reynolds and his team sat quietly. They had done what they believed right, regardless of political consequences. Whatever the Council decided, Earth would continue to defend itself and others if needed. After hours of debate, a vote was called. The amendment passed by a narrow margin. Humans would remain banned from routine conflicts but could be called upon in times of dire need. As the council session ended, Admiral Kyle Zinn approached the human delegation. His skin had a warm golden hue, a sign of respect among Thalasians. Captain Reynolds, he said, extending a hand in the human greeting style he had learned. My people owe you a debt we can never repay. Half of New Hope's population was safely evacuated because of your actions. Reynolds shook the offered hand. We did what anyone would do. No. Kyle Zinn replied firmly. That's what we finally understood. Not everyone would do what you did. Most species wouldn't. My own included. Later, as the humans prepared to return to their ships, a young Thalasian officer approached Ryan and Heather. I have a question, he said hesitantly. During the battle, the Defiance took severe damage to protect our evacuation ships. 2 of your vessels were destroyed, creating the breach in the control ship. Why were humans willing to die for species? They barely knew? Ryan looked at Heather, then back at the young officer. Because that's what humans do, he replied simply. We're at our best when things are at their worst. The officer considered this. Is that why you were banned? Because you fight too hard? No, Heather said with a gentle smile. We were banned because the galaxy couldn't bear the cost we were willing to pay for victory. But now they understand. Sometimes that cost is necessary. As the Earth fleet prepared to depart Council space, messages poured in from across the galaxy. Many were from New Hope survivors, thanking the humans for their sacrifice. Others came from military commanders who had witnessed the battle, expressing new respect for Earth tactics. On the bridge of the repaired Defiance, Captain Reynolds read through the messages with mixed emotions. The victory had been costly. Good. People had been lost, but millions had been saved, and perhaps more importantly, a new understanding had been forged. Set course for Earth, he ordered. Let's go home. What about the ban, sir? His first officer asked. We're still technically restricted from most council space. Reynolds smiled slightly. I have a feeling we'll be called back sooner than anyone expects. The galaxy's a dangerous place. Sometimes you need people willing to break the rules to save it. As the Earth fleet jumped to faster than light speed, news of their actions continued to spread. On countless worlds, people looked to the stars with new knowledge. Humans had been banned from galactic wars not because they were too dangerous to their enemies, but because they fought with a commitment few other species could understand or match. The ban remained in place, but its meaning had changed. What once had been seen as a punishment was now recognized as a somber acknowledgement. Humans were the galaxy's last resort, the ones you called when all other options had failed. In the years that followed, Earth continued to develop its technology and train its defense forces. They maintained the peace in their own system and honored the Council's ban, but they also kept their ships ready, their crews prepared, because sooner or later, the galaxy would need them again. And when that day came, Humanity would answer the call just as they always had, not with perfect formations or careful strategies, but with an unbreakable will to protect life, whatever the cost. The galaxy now understood why humans were banned from galactic wars, and strangely enough, humanity took it as a compliment.